Hello everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell and it's time for the weekly Fireside chat video. So here I am. As you can see, I'm kind of comfortable today, kicking back, wearing my Old Navy t-shirt and trying to get some things done. Just first of all, by way of an update, Daniel and I are continuing to work on the members only area. I've started writing some white papers on some questions that people have been sending in. And we don't really know when the members only area is going to get set up, but that's going to be a lot of work. So we're hoping soon, but I'll keep everybody posted. We are working on it. And I do appreciate everybody's comments and everything that you've been sending in on what you'd like me to do videos on and answer questions. All right. And as you can see, I'm indulging my vices, my Mr. Pibb and my cigarette, which is usually how I work. People ask me how I write my books. Well, that's the secret. Mr. Pibb and cigarettes. All right. I had something that someone sent in as a comment on the website. His name is Bill. And he asked two questions that I want to address in this little talk because I think they're rather timely. The first one is, he asks, could that Junkers 390 aircraft with its cargo and essential personnel have landed at a super secret location somewhere in the Adirondacks Mountains in the wilderness of New York State? Well, the short answer is yes. The Junkers 390, as I've outlined in my books, was a six-engine aircraft. It was fully capable of flying non-stop from Germany all the way to Argentina. So it certainly could have made the flight from Europe to New York. But I rather doubt that that's where it went. The reason why, as I detail in my Nazi International book, is because the projects that we see going on in Argentina under the auspices of Juan Perón's government were really, in my opinion, a continuation of some aspects of the Nazi Bell Project. So I think, with all deference and respect to my colleagues Igor Vitkovsky and Nick Cook, who maintain that part of that project came to this country, I think the bulk of it was kept out of Allied hands. Now, that's not to say that some of this project, or at least some of the technologies or physics that it represented, may have ended up here. And that brings me to his next question. He asks this: during Project Apollo between 1969 and 72 as regards Apollo 17, what might astronauts Cernan and Schmidt have found within that large rectangular opening in South Massif at Taurus Littrow, and all that debris made up of explosively shattered bits of machinery in and around Shorty Crater? I can't help but feeling that Data's head that Richard C. Hoagland discusses in Dark Mission might actually be a petrified skull from one of a multitude of victims in an attack on a military base. All right. Well, he then goes on to wonder if there could at this moment actually be people, including possibly Americans, on the moon, quietly and secretly inventorying some of the things that are found there. And I have to go back to something that I've said in several interviews, and I'm going to add a little bit more detail in this comment. And that is, if we assume that my rationalization of the Nazi Bell Project as being a project that was for three purposes, as a gateway technology to give them three things. First being free energy, the second being a genuine field propulsion, or if you will, an anti-gravity, and the third thing being the ultimate doomsday weapon. If to any degree they were successful in that, and I believe that they were, then you have to factor in it's been almost 65 years, if not more, since the end of World War II. So if you add enough money and enough manpower, what might you have accomplished in that time period? Now I want to go to something that another colleague of mine by the name of Michael Schratt, you can actually find his name on my Facebook page under my friends list. Michael is a researcher in off the books, more or less hidden in plain sight advanced aerospace technology. And one of the things that he points out in some of his lectures that are on DVD and some of his articles is that Ben Rich, who was the head of Lockheed's Skunk Works, shortly before he died, he said three very amazing things, at least as far as I'm concerned. And I'm paraphrasing. The first thing that Ben Rich said was that we have now, and this was at the time of his death, which has been a number of years ago now, but we have now, he said, the technology to go to the stars. And then, as if to emphasize this, he also said we have the technology to take ET home. So, in other words, the first implication of these two statements is if he is telling the truth, and given the fact that he's saying these things close to his death, we have to assume that he might have been doing so. If he is telling the truth, then clearly what we have is a case of technologies that are far beyond even those advanced black projects technologies that have been declassified. So he's clearly implying that we have some sort of advanced interplanetary technology that can do precisely what Bill in his comments is suggesting, that there might actually be some sort of parallel track or hidden space program. All right. Now, in that respect, I want to mention one more thing, and that was the hacker over in England that hacked into NASA and found a database, allegedly, of all these extraterrestrial off-world ships that the United States is running, including the officers in charge of them. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but I do think it's very interesting that the American government seems hell-bent for leather to extradite this gentleman from Great Britain and bring him to this country and try him and throw him away for the rest of his life, basically, in prison for espionage activities. Now, this brings me to a third point that Ben Rich made, and I find this the most interesting point of them all. When he was giving these comments about advanced technology and the possibilities that they represented, taking ET home and so on, one of the things he said is that we found an error in the equations. Now, that to me is extremely interesting because he doesn't say what equations that they supposedly found the error in. But he does suggest something that I and other researchers have been saying for a number of years, and that is that the standard model of physics somehow is deeply flawed. It's almost as if it is designed to be a physics to dead end, to get us nowhere. For example, the modern example or theory of string theory, which exists depending on the dimensional rotation of the theory, which exists in 10 dimensions or 26 dimensions, is, by the admission of the theory's own creators, an untestable theory. It's a mathematical formalism, in other words, that they think is true, but they have no way, given the enormous energies involved, that it would be necessary to test the theory. It's basically an untestable theory. So in other words, physics in a certain sense has sort of dead-ended. Now, I've pointed out in any number of books, beginning with the SS Brotherhood of the Bell, that if you go back to James Clerk Maxwell's original theory of the unification of electricity and magnetism, that he originally couched his equations in a totally different mathematical language than what is used now as his equations. He couched them in a language called quaternions that allowed you to do certain things that the language that his equations cast in now do not allow you to do. And one of the interesting things is that if you study this original language and some of its implications, it would appear that there was indeed some sort of coupling effect that was being suggested in his equations between electromagnetism and gravity. All right. So in other words, I find it very interesting that Ben Rich, an engineer, head of Lockheed Skunk Works, would say that there was an error in the equations, but again, he's not specifying what it is. But if his comment is true, then this does mean that there is also, in addition to this off the books technology, there's an off the books physics that's supporting it. All right. And that to me is the most telling thing. So, in answer to your question, Bill, could there be people up there doing these things right now rather secretly? Well, yes, I think so. Given all that we know about the development of advanced technology, all that we've been able to find out within the last 15 years about some of the things that the Nazis were doing, and since the collapse of the Soviet Union, some of the things that they were doing. So anyway, that's my quick little fireside chat for today. I may be doing more as the day progresses and I get comments. I've kind of decided to try and reserve weekends to do these little fireside chats, and then during the week do my writing and research and so on. So anyway, that brings us to the end of this one, and we're well into 2011. I want to thank everybody for your comments, your support, and your donations especially. There are a lot of you making donations that have made this website changeover possible, and I want to make sure to thank all of you for that, and especially that one dear lady. You know who you are. Thank you so much, because none of this would be possible without all of you. Thank you again. Bye bye.